in accordance with that against the system.
No.
In a physical way.
Wrong.
I don't think that's wrong.
Read a book.
I mean, just saying.
Every single instance.
Just saying, five guys are running around with guns in some small-scale incursion. That's not fucking civil war.
Didn't say it was civil war.
Well, that's what we're talking about.
Andrew Wilson and Tim Pool are debating, where Pool literally loses it live over Andrew Wilson calling him out for his Civil War rhetoric. Now, we all know that Tim Pool is famous for predicting civil war, and he swears that it's around the corner every time, kind of like how a false prophet, a false preacher would predict the end of the world, saying that it's around the corner for so long and it's not happened yet. But Andrew Wilson calls him out for it by saying that he is wrong and that if he were right, it basically do not equal a civil war. Now, Tim uses January 6th as an example, but Andrew Wilson says that there's no civil war and people have forgotten about that date. Now, Pool also uses the BLM riots, and Andrew Wilson says that if you say something for so many times, eventually you'll get a few things right, but there's no civil war. Now, Andrew Wilson is criticizing Pool for, his moves and stuff, for the predictions that Pool made, and Andrew Wilson basically got tired of it, and he finally calls out people like Tim Pool for this. So here's a debate between Andrew Wilson and Tim Pool and Tim Katz in real life. If you enjoy what's being shown on this channel about Andrew Wilson, be sure to subscribe to the channel, click the bell notification, so that way you're notified of future uploads and updates. Here we go.
Later, come November, chances are good Trump gets in. Not Trump, Biden gets in, and Trump supporters don't really do anything. He concedes. And that's probably how it's going to go.
Again, I think you live in a movie. I think you think doing something is a guy standing up and saying, I hereby declare, instead of 7 guys going out and being like, hey, can we make sure that any of those trucks coming in don't have the illegals? Because we've had a couple trucks come through here that did, and they've been transporting them. Now, I tried calling ICE, but they won't answer. So Jim and I are going to go out.
Don't consider that a civil war. That would be low-scale vigilanteism.
So, right. And what precipitates civil war?
It would have to be some large segment of the population, that 5% or higher, who are doing some type of sedition or considerable treason, what would be considered considerable treason to the United States government. That is what I would consider to be some type of actionable civil warfare.
Just 5%?
Yeah, 10%.
What is it, 60%? 60%? No, it's like 70% of the Republicans think that the Democrats have already committed sedition.
Yeah, I'm sure that they do.
Right,
but
so
they're not acting in a way as though they have.
I think
that's the problem, right? If you think that somebody has truly acted in a way as to be a traitor, right? What do you do to traitors?
Sedition and treason are two different things.
Yeah, I know. But if you were to say that you think a person's acting in such a way that they're a traitor, what do you do to traitors? Last I checked, they get hung, right?
But treason and sedition are not the same thing.
Yeah, I know. But the point of my hypothetical is to say they're not acting in such a way as though these people, while they say you're seditious or they say you're treasonous, whichever one, they're not acting as though they are. They might say it, but they're not acting like it.
What does that mean, they're not acting like it?
Well, if somebody is guilty of sedition, that's firing squad. If they're guilty of treason, they get hung.
Sedition is not.
They don't get worked with.
Sedition is like maximum 10 years in prison, I believe.
Okay, fine. Well, they're not getting 10 years in prison either. But
well, that's the question of whether Donald Trump gets elected. The issue is conservatives overwhelmingly they're not revolutionaries. The question is, do we expect, with everything that's already happened, we're at the point now where since the beginning of this conversation with Donald Trump, they've accused the president of being a traitor. They've accused Donald Trump of being a traitor.
That's true.
They have acted as though he is a traitor. They cemented his feet so that he couldn't run his administration. They effectively levied legal war against him during his entire administration.
Yeah, but you need a percentage of the American public who's acting in accordance with that against the system.
No.
In a physical way.
Wrong.
I don't think that's wrong.
Read a book.
I mean, just saying.
Every single instance.
Just saying, five guys are running around with guns in some small-scale incursion. That's not fucking civil war.
Didn't say it was civil war.
Well, that's what we're talking about, is civil unrest and civil war.
And what precipitates that is social breakdown when people lose confidence in their government.
I agree. That's what precipitates it. That's true.
My thing is, how many people in that population will actually feel that way? What's the actual percentage of it? That's something I haven't heard, from Tim Pool answer and stuff. but I'm pretty sure Andrew Wilson might have said it and I might have missed it. But the fact of the matter is you need a certain percentage of people who will feel that way, who also act out like really violently to the point where it's actually treason or like, you know, something that would actually jeopardize the safety, security, as well as the standing of this country. I mean, let's try to think back to, you know, how the original war started out. You know, it started off with secession and stuff, as well as, you know, basically with one part of the country with the South trying to separate from the Union because of a certain event that happened at that time. What events today will happen that will lead to civil war? That's the very question right there, because as you all know, Poole often talk about civil war happening, this, that, and third, but at the same time, it seems like, you know, I mean, he may be educated on it and knows well about it, but he often gets it wrong when it comes to current events. So Andrew Wilson is easily trying to go ahead and try to, you know, hammer away further at Poole, and Andrew Wilson is still looking for, you know, a actual good response and stuff to where he could agree with Poole, but Andrew Wilson still hasn't got a viable answer from Poole yet.
You have social breakdown, you have social cohesion breaking
so
down.
You're sitting here going,
but that doesn't mean that that's what it is. And you can also, you know what else you can get? Instead of civil war, you can get, instead of revolution, instead of civil war, you can have a renaissance too. Sometimes social breakdowns lead to renaissance. You forget about that as well.
Well, usually you get a revolution or you get a civil war. Civil wars will end with one power structure typically takes over. The outright destruction is rare. Someone always asserts authority. But you get a revolution when no one fights, or you get a civil war when someone decides to fight back. What we could experience is a communist revolution in the United States.
You could.
If the right does nothing. We are facing an election where we already know from 2020 no one will agree on the results. To then say, after this election, everything will be fine, I believe is absurdity.
Okay, so
I agree. I can't believe I'm
saying this.
I
I'll say this. I'll say this. No, I still have to disagree. This has been going on for years and years, where the American government has prepared for contingencies for civil war. This has been going on forever. And to be honest with you, Tim, you've been talking about the Civil War since long before I even got into online politics. I was listening to you talk about, hey, this is right around the corner. It's coming soon to a theater near you. The stage is set. We're very close to it. And we weren't really that close to it. So the thing is like...
Do you think January 6th wasn't a dramatic escalation of political violence?
I think, sure. I think that you could have a lead up over many years. Over many years.
So I was correct. What did the SPLC accuse me of?
What do you mean? When did you predict Jan 6?
In September. I love this because it's in the lawsuits against me too. SPLC's written about it because in like September of or it might have been August of 2020, I said, if Donald Trump loses, you're going to see dudes showing up in D.C. They're going to lose their mind and storm the White House or something because they are not going to accept this. You're right.
The thing is, they did not storm the White House. They actually stormed the congressional buildings and stuff. But what would actually cause a civil war in the U.S. and stuff, which, you know, the answer that Andrew Wilson was trying to get out of Tim Poole was the fact that there could have been like deep political polarization, where that polarization could lead to a breakdown in the political process where compromise becomes nearly impossible. Then there's also possible disputes over any kind of fundamental rights and ideologies, like issues over gun rights, freedom of speech, role of government, and personal lives will become battlegrounds where the cultural clash between those different ideologies can basically like increase tensions, making them higher, leading to violent confrontations. If legislative or judicial decisions that are basically seen as any kind of threat or existential threats to one group's way of life or rights, and there's also the matter of the economy, where there's disparity and collapse, and then also the racial and identity conflicts, where there'll be higher than usual racial tensions and stuff that could escalate, particularly if they intersect with other socioeconomic grievances. Then there's also election integrity and governance, where disputes over election results or perceived legitimacy of government actions that could ignite a huge conflict of violence. And we didn't really see much of that from January 6th because that's actually been stopped and everything. But if it were to continue and not be resolved, then we'd have a civil war. But then there's also the legal and constitutional disputes where it comes to, like, you know, if legislation or judicial rulings are seen as infringing on state sovereignty or individual liberties in a manner that one side or another finds intolerable. And then there's also external influences and domestic unrest where it can't be controlled but continues to spread, leading to increased domestic unrest with use of social media and rapid spread of information or disinformation can actually inflame the situations quickly. Okay. And then there's also the military and militia dynamics where there's like any kind of, you know, existence of armed militias and everything combined with highly militarized civilian population. That's where the percentage comes into effect, provides the potential for organized resistance or conflict. If these groups actually feel, you know, compelled to act due to the perceived threats or, as they would say, injustices, the situation could actually escalate. And I think that's where Andrew Wilson is trying to go ahead and get into and lead further into that as well. And the fact of the matter is that Andrew Wilson is still looking for a viable answer, and Andrew Wilson is not necessarily convinced about that. So I thought I'd share that with you all. Let's go ahead and get back to this debate between Andrew Wilson and Poole.
It wasn't the White House. It was the Capitol building. Mm-hmm. And then they wrote, Tim Poole had foreknowledge of January 6th, and here's proof because he predicted. No, it's because I read. And I said, wow, based on everything these people are saying and preparing for, they're going to go to D.C. and do something like this. And then they did.
Yeah, but I think if you say that the sky is falling enough times, just like Alex Jones, eventually a couple of those things are
dude.
correct.
In 2018, when I said escalation of political violence is going to reach a massive tipping point, and then in 2020, they firebombed St. John's Church and the White House grounds, and they took over numerous cities, I predicted that. So to say, you've been saying for a long time it's around the corner, and every time you say something's going to happen, it does, but you're still wrong. Dude, I don't care if I'm wrong.
Well, it's not every time you say it that it doesn't happen. What I'm saying is that you've made the prediction so many times. I've heard it so many times on your show. Are we this close? We're this close to civil war. It's right around the corner, ladies and gentlemen. And the real question is, what will happen when the civil war gets here? I haven't seen the Civil War, Tim. I'm going to be honest with you, and it doesn't look to me like the political will is there to do it. Now, the January 6th people went quietly into the night, and nobody's really saying much about that either.
So the first thing I'll say academically is I don't know if you've ever actually read history books. Perhaps a guy like me read? Yes, I've read history books. And well, so when you read articles specifically about various historical periods, you realize that we condense it in our history books. And so when we talk about the rise of Hitler, people tend to forget that it's like 20 years through Weimar Germany leading up to this point where this guy rises to power. And so
the conditions were set for the Weimar Republic. We had massive inflation.
I think you're either being purposefully obtuse or you cannot comprehend basic facts.
Well,
and the intentional being intentionally obtuse is to say, I recognize that many different academics have predicted civil war, state that we're in civil strife. You said political violence is going to escalate. The summer of love did happen. You said in 2020 that a bunch of angry Trump supporters are going to go to D.C. and storm, the White House. It wasn't the White House, it was the Capitol building. You got that one right. And you've been warning about how these things lead to each other. And now today, as of today, because the civil war didn't kick off at any of those time periods, you've been wrong to predict these things are escalating. The first thing is, when I say, hey, look, here's a guy who said this thing is happening, that's not me predicting it. That's saying a Princeton professor has made this prediction. A former CIA official has made this prediction. Numerous security advisors have made this prediction. Canada is saying it's improbable. So it's not necessarily a prediction, but they're concerned about its potentiality. Investors are now making this prediction. We are in civil strife. I'm not making that up, nor am I predicting it. I'm saying that's an assessment of leaders in politics, infrastructure,
and culture. Of some leaders, of some people, not of every. There's no united academia saying this is right around the corner, guys. That's not happening. You pull the sources that you want because they help craft your narrative, Tim.
And then
here's my thing. Tim might have predicted these things, but these have not resulted in becoming a civil war at all. Like, what would result? Like, what has been the civil war? that's where Andrew Wilson's trying to simply get to, because it seems to me that Tim Pool, as he reads and everything, and he uses different evidences and stuff, but at the same time, those don't provide proof as to civil war coming. You know, these predictions of civil war, you know, he's always made, and, you know, they've actually never come to fruition to become civil wars. They'll be like, civil, basically divisions and stuff, but as far as civil war, I mean, it would result to that if these things weren't able to be stopped or resolved, as I've mentioned earlier.
And the summer of love happens, I was wrong.
Okay, so again, if you say the sky is falling every single day, eventually you get some keys of it right. But I've been hearing this from you for a long, long, long time.
What have you heard from
here. Again, I'll repeat it. I have listened to you long before I was ever inside of any type of political commentary. I was listening to you talk about coming civil wars, how this is happening.
What was wrong?
In the next few months, next few months, this could really set the stage between the states and this for a new civil war.
What was wrong? What was wrong?
They just didn't happen.
What didn't happen?
None of these civil wars that you.
What civil wars did I predict that didn't happen? What civil wars?
Well, I didn't come in with a list of all the times Tim Pool's predicted civil war, but dude,
okay, you're at the point
famous for it.
You're at the point where you've lost the argument and you're making things up.
What part of the argument did I lose?
You said that I predicted a civil war would happen at a period.
No, I'm saying that you talk about it constantly.
Right.
And I have not.
What was I wrong about?
I haven't seen any of the evidence of this.
Summer of Love is not evidence.
No, it's not. There's no civil war, even from the Summer of Love. That's not a civil war.
When did I predict that the Summer of Love would lead to a June 21st civil war in the United States?
I mean, that's what we're talking about right now, though, is the leading. So when is this? So let's be hyper specific then. What area, what decade, next 5 years, next 4 years, next 3 years, do you think we'll see a civil war? Or is it something you're talking about that's 30 or 40 or 50 years down the road? Or do you just not know?
Literally, I've said, I don't know.
You don't know.
And so you made up that I predicted a civil war at a specific period.
No, I'm saying that that's all I've heard you talk about for years.
Well,
Yeah, that's basically what he's known for. So let me know your thoughts about this in the comments below. Do you agree with Andrew Wilson, or do you agree with Tim Pool? Do you think that Pool has some good arguments, or do you think that, Andrew Wilson has some better arguments with this reasoning? Let me know your thoughts about this in the comments below. Also, be sure to include any additional thoughts you might have on this particular topic. If you enjoyed what was shared in this video, go ahead and smash the like button and share the video far wide across social media. And if you haven't done so already, you enjoyed all the content that I put out there, go ahead, subscribe to the channel, click the bell notifications, so that way you're notified of future uploads and updates. Till then, peace.